Before we begin this next session, I'm not sure, is this working now?
I think it
All
is.
right, before we begin this next section, we want to frame the importance of what you are about to hear. Across Texas, a massive new transmission proposal spanning roughly 4,000 miles and cutting wide corridors through private land is raising serious questions about the future of rural communities, property rights, grid reliability, and the true cost of energy infrastructure. As outlined in recent analysis, these 765 kilovolt transmission lines would require extensive easements across millions of acres, potentially impacting land values, agricultural operations, and natural resources, all while primarily serving to move, not generate, electricity across the state. This conversation sits squarely at the intersection of agriculture, energy policy, and private property rights, and it's one that will shape Texas for many generations to come.
Yeah, to help us unpack these issues, we're going to be joined by two individuals who bring both technical expertise and deep Texas roots to this conversation. Kevin Kennedy is a civil engineer by training with decades of experience in large-scale infrastructure planning and design across the state, including major highway systems. Just as importantly, he is a lifelong Texan with multi-generational ties to the land, someone who understands firsthand the realities of farming, ranching, and rural life. Alongside him is Meredith McCall, a professional engineer with more than 20 years of experience in water systems, regional planning, and infrastructure development across the state of Texas. She's worked with major utilities and municipalities statewide and brings a strong background in how large-scale infrastructure projects are evaluated, designed, and even implemented. Together, they offer a uniquely grounded and an informed perspective on what this project means not only on paper, but on the ground for Texas landowners as well as communities. So please join us in welcoming Kevin Kennedy and Meredith McCall.
Good morning. Commissioner Miller, thank you for allowing us to come and speak about this important issue. And, I was introduced as an expert, and maybe I know a little bit about some things and a little more about others. But what I know about electricity, well, I started off, I knew two things. One, it's invisible, and two, it'll kill you. And then from there, I was just fat and happy. I turn the light switch on, lights come on. I throw the breaker, the well kicks on and kicks out water. But last June, I got an invitation to a public meeting in Lampasas about these 765 kV lines. And they were going to bring one through my place, or at least there was an option that came through it. And so I thought, well, I need to educate myself. So since then, I've studied this a great deal. And I think I probably understand the grid and the Permian Basin reliability plan and the 765 plan about as well as any civilian, someone who's not directly involved. And so as I stand up here talking, y'all are going to figure out two things. One, that guy doesn't get to town very often. And the other is that fella doesn't talk for a living. But I do have a nice story about my wife of 37 years. I'm gonna take advantage of Commissioner Miller setting this up for me. So my wife was out of town a couple of days ago, and she called me and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on my daggum old power line." And she said, "Well, I should have figured that because that's about all you've been doing." But she said, "I do have some good news for you." She said, "You know how you always say daggum old? Like Boomhauer from or some TV show." And she said, "All my friends called you Boomhauer." But she said, "They don't call you Boomhauer anymore. They now call you Kilowatt Kevin, because all you do is study this dang electricity." So anyway, so I'm going to impart some of my knowledge on y'all. So back, that's an Ace Reed cartoon, and that fella's finding some shade under that power pole. Well, you're going to get a lot of shade under these 765s. So I got another story. No, actually I don't. I had those all keyed up. And okay, so here we go. So this plan, so it comes from all this technology that we've been talking about. That's really what's driving it. All right, they're telling me I'm good here in a minute. But what really got this 765 rolling was our 88th legislature that met in 2023. And they passed House Bill 5066 unanimously, 31-0 in the Senate, 135-0 in the House. It's got a little bit of political push behind it. And it did really three main things. One, it mandated that ERCOT develop a reliability plan for the Permian. They need to be electrified. There's a lot of infrastructure out there that they're running off little individual generators. It's not efficient. It's not efficient energy-wise. It's not efficient labor-wise. It needs to be fixed. They wanted to study on that. But they also required that ERCOT change how they determine the load demand for their future forecasting as they design the grid and they look forward. They changed it from it had to be under contract to the transmission companies who build that grid basically just say, this is what we need. Just a letter with their signature on it, and that caused that load demand to jump through the roof. And then they kind of undermined the people by cutting the review time at the PUC in half. It used to be 1 year, they cut it to 180 days. The public used to have about 8 or 9 months to explore and debate the proposals before the PUC went behind closed doors for about 3 months and decided what to do. Well, the PUC still gets their 3 months behind closed doors, but the people went from 9 months to 3. So not only did they blow up the program, but they cut our time in half. So the Permian Basin Plan itself also had 3 things that it had to do. The text in green is basically the same thing. That's building transmission infrastructure out in the Permian to serve the well, to take the power to the wellhead, to the compressor, so that they can run that equipment. The other was to get power in the Permian. So they didn't have the infrastructure to move it around, and then they didn't have the power itself. So it was charged with solving those 2 things. Well, the way they solved it was with what they called import paths. Rather than generating it there locally, which is what most people immediately default to, they decided to build these big superhighways of transmission from the eastern portion of the state, from where all the population is, all the current load demand is, and take that power that really doesn't exist out west to the Permian. This is a little bit of a look at those 3 lines. Each of the 2 northern, or the northern one and the middle one, are both about 400 miles long each, about 10,000 acres of impact, direct impact of the easement under the line that's going to be cleared down to grass, all woody plants removed. The bottom one's about 350, so there's close to 30,000 acres in those 3 lines alone. This is a kind of a blow up of those. Some of the towns, give you an idea where they are, and also so you can see the country that they cut through. Mine in Burnett County, you'll see I'm right on the edge of I'm in the Edwards Plateau right next to the Llano Uplift, and it cuts through a lot of that country, that center route that they call Import Path 2. That hits me in the east, and that same line hits Meredith out in the west. So here's the timeline that they developed. Kicked off in May of 2023 with the passing of that bill, and they've just moved very quickly. ERCOT did their study within about a year. They decided on the 765. So the 765, right now, the biggest transmission line in Texas is a 345 kilovolt. As you travel around the state, the biggest one you see, 345. These are 765s. So more than twice the voltage, probably 50% scale up on the size of the infrastructure. These are big, big lines. And then you see where we are now. We're in the middle of that green process, that's the 180 days for that line that comes through Meredith and I. So we're hip deep in it, trying to do what we can to slow this down and represent property owners through this review process. So that right-of-way, 200 feet wide, about 30,000 acres, a lot of restrictions on the easement. And then once that camel gets its nose under the tent, there's going to be more coming. And that's just the Permian Basin plan that the PUC has approved. This is the layout for all the 365s that ERCOT is proposing around the state, that the ERCOT Board of Directors has made this recommendation and presented it to the PUC. They haven't made a decision on that eastern backbone yet, but it's coming, and it will touch everyone that you know. Everyone that you know will be touched by this in some manner. So I'm going to turn it over to Meredith and let her tell you a little bit about her story.
Which button do I press here?
The green one.
The green one,
The big
okay.
green.
All right. Thank you for having me today. I so very much appreciate the opportunity to speak. I want to begin with just one number so y'all can remember this: 28,500 acres. That is the total amount of private property that we'll be taking from these import path projects. And it's being taken out of private hands. These lines have 200-foot right-of-ways, and they are 200 feet tall. They are large. And across all three of those projects that we're showing here in the yellow, they are, it's going to be 28,500 acres. Remember that number. I'm going to come back to it in a minute. So much of this land, obviously, we're all here to talk about ag. It's agriculture land, it's farming, it's ranching, it's wildlife management. And once it's taken, it is gone and removed for productive use. Even beyond just the physical right-of-way, landowners are going to be facing easement restrictions on these lines. And so this is going to limit what they can do with their own property. These corridors will often invite other pipelines, transmission mains, and additional data centers to come in as well. And they will be chipping away at all of our ag lands and permanently removing landowner control. And so when I was first asked to speak, I was honored. I'm so happy to be here to talk about this. But then reality started to set in, and I thought, what am I going to talk about today? Kevin and I both are drinking from the fire hose right now with this stuff. Like he said, we have 2 to 3 months to defend our properties, try to figure out the complicated SOA hearing process, the regulatory processes, and we are very, very busy. Kevin and I both spoke at an intervener workshop on Thursday where we were educating other people how to do the SOA case hearing so that we can defend our property. So we've had little time to prepare for this. And I thought, well, maybe I should speak about what is happening on our family ranch out in West Texas. And this is one of the two properties that's affected for this line. This is our ranch out in West Texas. This is Erie County, Texas. So to put it in perspective, it's southwest of San Angelo. And it's been in my family since 1963. My grandfather, Hiram Phillips, acquired it. He was the owner of the Sheep and Goat Raiser magazine in San Angelo, Texas. He was also a strong advocate for conservation and soil conservation, and he won many awards. And my parents carried that forward with their ranching processes. And in fact, they won an award in 2019 for Soil Conservation Ranchers of the Year. And today we run a cow-calf operation on that ranch. We have an Angus Beef Master mix, and we lease part of the ranch for hunters, for recreational hunting as well. We are on the edge of the Permian Basin, and we have working mineral leases that we operate as well. And so this is a working ranch. This is not idle land at all. And as you can see, and let me explain the map a little bit. Our ranch is outlined in the blue, and you can see the hills and the valleys. It covers approximately 2,400 acres, and it lies on the watershed divide between Spring and Dove Creek, which feeds a major reservoir for City of San Angelo. The terrain ranges from 270 feet throughout the whole property, and it features high, steep limestone hills, diverse valleys, and we live just on the edge of the oak habitat there in San Angelo. Very wide viewscapes, beautiful West Texas vistas. There are no natural water features on our ranch, and so our water is very, very critical. Just to brag on my family a little bit, our brothers and our family, we have 6 engineers in our family, and we all install our own water systems and our fencing. And one of my brothers recently decided that we needed to start mapping all of our assets on the ranch, and so he put together a GIS database of our water infrastructure, our fences, our tanks, our roads, our conservation contracts, so that we know exactly where everything is. And he generated this map based on all that database that you see here today. So for today's discussion, I want to focus on the 285 acres that's in the southwest portion of the ranch. And that is the pasture that we call Buck Ridge. Now, Buck Ridge contains a 150-foot tall limestone hill with a 10-foot caprock going all the way around it. And there is one usable route to cross that hill, and it's on the southern border of our property. We have tried and tried to look for a continuous loop in that pasture, but there's just no way to cross that caprock. And so this pasture also has 2 separate water systems that are sourced independently. All right? And so this is where that transmission main is crossing our property. You think, you kind of look at this picture and you think, well, you guys kind of got lucky. It's in the back part of your property. It's not bothering you. But I want to show you that that the impacts go beyond that 11 acres that they have drawn on that map, okay? And it includes some serious economic impacts, all right? So here's some pictures of our ranch. It's beautiful. We've worked on a lot of contracts to clear cedar and mesquite. And the picture in the left corner is from our south pasture, and you can see in the background the 150-foot tall Buck Ridge mountain or hill right there. The photo to the right is our water well in our southern system, and that is it's connected to 4 different watering troughs in 2 different pastures. All right. And then on the bottom left is that road I was telling you about, that single access point to our pasture, and a 3,000-gallon water tank that supplies water pressure and supply to all of our water troughs, okay? And so here's a closer view of that 285-acre pasture that we call Buck Ridge, all right? That back 130 acres is entirely dependent on that road that we cross over. And that road is directly under the 765 kV line. And so you talk to any experienced rancher that has a transmission line on their property, and they will tell you that cattle behavior changes under these power lines. And so cows will avoid them. So that means our 130 acres right there, we will struggle to move our cattle back there to utilize the grazing in that back acres. And so that's going to be chronically underutilized and overall reducing our effective grazing capacity on our ranch. Now, even more concerning is our water infrastructure. If you look at the very bottom, you see the water system on the southern side. That would all be impacted because it crosses right on top of our water well and our water tank. And so anytime you talk about water infrastructure, there can be strayed induced currents from these transmission lines that will go through the pipes into your watering facilities. And so that also now removes another 120 acres from production because our cattle will not be incentivized to go over there to drink from the water troughs. And so the result of this is that we're going to have fewer cattle that we're able to raise on a ranch, reduce capacity, and lower productive use on our land. And so really that 11 acres lost due to the right-of-way alone turns into 250 acres gone out of production, all right? So I also want to touch on some other economic impacts on this. The transmission line on this will also materially affect our oil and gas leases, okay? So remember how Kevin said that this is for the oil and gas patch. This is going to affect oil and gas infrastructure. We have existing surface use agreements for drilling, and I can guarantee you a drilling operator will not do a rig under a line like this because of the arc potential. And so our 130 acres that's on the backside will not be utilized in our future oil and gas contracts. We also have a smaller natural gas pipeline on the south end of our ranch. These lines will all need to be installed with what we call an AC mitigation system. And what it does is it keeps the line from corroding underneath that transmission main. And so that's going to be another impact on our ranch. And that's to ensure that there's safety when those lines intersect, okay? Now, we also are talking about problems with our recreational hunting leases. We lease this pasture along with a 750 acre adjacent pasture to recreational hunting. And as you know, the reason why these guys go out there is to get away from the city. They want, to see the beautiful vistas, be out in nature, enjoy time, and also hunt. So introducing a massive transmission corridor through this landscape will seriously jeopardize that lease, and if not, a permanent loss. And so this is another hit to our ranch income. And then finally, I want to touch on another topic that often gets overlooked, and that is the cost of defending your property. So because these final routes are all kind of subject, and the route is eventually selected by the PUCT of Texas, every landowner in the study area can potentially be subject for takings, okay? So every landowner, even the ones that are not on the best met route, will need to defend their property. And landowners do have the option to hire an attorney to represent them in these cases, but that comes at a cost, right? So it could go as far as $80,000 or more per property, depending on how far that landowner is willing and able to fight, okay? And so these legal costs will cut directly into the ranch profitability, and many landowners this year will probably show losses on their income statements and for their tax purposes. And it's not because the land failed them, it's because they are forced to defend their property. So in addition to the safety, or in addition to the economic impacts, we're going to talk about safety a little bit. So we're out in dry West Texas. Fire risk is real. There are very real documented cases where these lines will catch fire. And so this can affect a property's ability to be insured. And so that will be a problem moving forward. Another risk that I have learned is, and I've learned this more during some of these cases, is that these lines will create what they're called induced currents, okay? The studies will show that there can be a stray current that can travel up to a mile away from these lines. And so just imagine, you're working on a water line or a fence or a pipeline, and you get shocked and you're in the middle of nowhere and the line is, nowhere near you. So that's another impact that we're all facing right now. So if you consider all these impacts, in the true footprint of this project grows far beyond that mapped right-of-way. And remember that number I told you, that 28,500 acres. So when you account for the direct and then indirect impacts multiplied across thousands of properties along these lines, each with their own unique issue, the real loss on private property in agriculture is far, far greater than that 28,500 acres. And so this is just an important thing to remember when people place lines on maps, and they do this in vacuums, that they need to be thinking about these impacts that are beyond just drawing a line on paper. And with that, I'm going to hand this to Kevin, and he's going to talk. I'm a ranch girl. He's in the farming side of things, and he's going to talk a little bit about farming.
All right, thank you, Meredith. So I'm actually not a farmer. I grew up ranching, and we did drag a disc around and try to get some seed in the ground, but we didn't farm. But my wife's family farms. She's her family's in Bell Williamson in Milam County. They're big farmers, and so I know a lot of farmers. So I called one the other day just to ask, what do you know about these transmission lines? Because my brother-in-law said that this Mr. Fleming had property under transmission lines, and he had two big things that he talked about. One was safety, and he said they've been farming. He said they had 3 farms that had existing transmission lines through them. They've been farming them since the 80s, and he said we do not stop equipment under those lines. He said we learned that pretty early on because of those stray currents coming from that electromagnetic field. Everything's got a charge on it, and he said you'd get shocked coming in and out of a piece of equipment, and he said it's problematic. Any type of like irrigation, like Meredith was saying, anything that'll capture that charge. So it's a danger, and it's a danger that there's probably not enough research on it for the state to consider it. It's just anecdotal, but it's real. The other thing is farm losses. You notice that photograph in the upper left, the black buzzards. That's a big issue. They're predators. They're not necessarily carrion, and these towers will bring them to your country. Like on our place, we don't have any cell towers anywhere near us. We don't have a big issue with buzzards. I've got an old 1850 standing chimney up on top of this hill, and a lone buzzard or two will roost on that every now and then. But these will bring them in by the hundreds and the thousands, and all of a sudden you've got another thing that you have to deal with. Mr. Fleming also said that twice transmission towers have been knocked down by tornadoes, once in the 80s and once in 2013. He said both times they come in immediately to repair them, and it's right after a storm, and he said they're going through his crop no matter what condition it's in. They're rutting it up, they're compacting the soil, and he said they'll compensate you for those direct damages, but he said it takes years to get that footprint kind of restored back to what it was. He said he loses yield, and I asked him, I said, what do you think? How much yield do you lose? I was expecting him to say maybe 5%, because I'm thinking about the electromagnetic field maybe affecting it. He said, I think 20%. And I said, golly. And he said, well, a lot of it is just wasteland. He said, you get these big towers, and you can't farm around them. It's not like the old days where you had smaller equipment. Now everything's so big that footprint has a big effect. And he said they'll offset them from the fence enough that you can't get between it and a fence, so you have a big strip of wasteland that you just can't farm. The GPS, we talked about precision farming. That is changing agriculture those transmission lines, they knock out your GPS. So you lose that ability, and then it takes a while to pick it back up. So all these issues, I think Commissioner Miller talked about how, you know, farmers and ranchers, they just overcome. And that's a true statement. But they shouldn't be forced to overcome on things of this nature, things that are not being considered. We don't need one more thing that we have to address. So I'll go back to this before we go to Q&A. Just as a reminder, this is coming, and it's coming statewide, and there's little known about it, and no one is aware of it. The only people that we come across that are aware of it are those that got a letter in the mail. And half of those people that got those original letters threw them in the trash, thought it was junk mail. I did, and I kind of do this for a living. I did these type of studies. I held public meetings. I invited people to the public meetings. I worked in that arena, and I got the notice. Fortunately, I didn't throw it away, but I didn't know what it was. It doesn't affect me. And a neighbor called me and alerted me to it. So they're sneaking under the radar. Whether they're purposely doing that or not, I don't know, but they are. So I think it's something worthy of paying attention to. And with that, if anybody's got any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Yes, ma'am.
Were you showing us the slide before, that they're coming in under the radar? Who are you talking about?
So this got an on switch. Can y'all hear me? There we go. This is that is the network that ERCOT has proposed for the new 765 transmission lines statewide, kind of a backbone. View it like in 1950 when they laid out the interstate highway system, which was a transportation concept far beyond anything that anyone had done before. That's basically what this is. It's an interstate highway system for these 765 transmissions. ERCOT has studied it. This is what they've proposed. They've recommended it to the Public Utility Commission of Texas. Those orange lines, that's those that were developed in the Permian Basin Plan. Those have been approved by the PUC. They're currently being developed. Between those three, it's about $12 billion, and there's another roughly $4 billion of work in the Permian. So that's a $15 billion roughly infrastructure program that's approved and underway, and the other is coming. But that's the they. It's ERCOT and the PUC as directed by our legislature.
So they're high-powered lines, they're like those big.
They're about probably, let's say, 50% bigger than the biggest transmission line you've ever seen.
So could I get a letter that was sent to you?
Could you get a copy of it?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, get with Meredith or myself afterwards.
Great. Thanks.
Do we have any other questions in the audience?
I've got one for you right now. How much of this has to do with the data centers that are being built all over Texas and all over the country right now?
I'll take that. It has a lot to do with the data centers. So in the permeability reliability plan, there was a section that talked about these lines supplying cryptocurrency data centers, hydrogen creation facilities, and so it's significant. And so it isn't apparent to a lot of people that it's being really thought for public use, for population growth, but it does appear to be mostly for data centers.
I'm going to add a little bit to that, and this is what I think is so egregious. So that House Bill 5066 passed in 2023. I said this at the beginning of my presentation, but it altered, the legislature directed ERCOT to alter the way they planned for future electrical demand. And previously, in order to add a big load to their study, to their plan, their model, their future model, It had to have a study and a contract, and it had to be basically far enough down the road that there was a lot of confidence that it was going to come. And then they would build the infrastructure for it. That House Bill 5066 changed that so that all the justification that's needed for the planning for this future infrastructure is a letter from the transmission company, a letter from the organization or the entity that's going to build the transmission line of how much power is coming, which is going to be used to justify the transmission. So to kind of give you an idea of that, on Friday, the Public Utility Commission, this is just this last Friday, had an open meeting, and at the end of the meeting, they invited ERCOT to come in and talk about their model for this year, for 2026. So the peak load demand ever in the state of Texas is like 83,000 megawatts. Ever. That's the most at any moment in time, the amount of juice that we're drawing. And the ERCOT is forecasting with these load letters 360,000 megawatts in the next 5 or 6 years. Now that's a 4-fold increase. Now do you think that's reality? Probably not. And how that comes is you get industry. And it could be any industry, could be manufacturing, could be data centers, could be crypto mining. They want to come to Texas, and they're going to land, they could land anywhere. Maybe they're looking at 3 different sites in Texas and some other states. So they call up a transmission company and say, hey, we're looking at a site at some particular location, and boom, that goes into the deal. Even though the likelihood of it happening is about 0. The ERCOT and the transmission companies have admitted this. They acknowledged that that's the case. And right now everybody just is saying, well, that's a problem. However, the Permian Basin Plan that's approved and they're moving forward, it was based on those inflated numbers. And even though after they approved it, they said, hey, these numbers are exaggerated. We need to think about this a little bit. They have not backed off on that because it's got momentum behind it. It's got money in the legislature, and I'm guessing it's going to be hard to stop. But so, yeah, data centers are a big part of it.
Well, are there those who are fighting this for like the next session in 2027? Is there like any representative in the House, or I mean, who is that?
Yeah, I'll take that question. Yes, so currently in the Senate, they are looking at this. It's in interim charges right now. And so there's a couple of senators that have come out to talk about this project and are working to reevaluate what we're doing with this. So hopefully that will push forward into our legislative session, which starts in January. However, these transmission lines can be approved before that legislative session. And so the problem that we're running into is that the keys of eminent domain can be handed down to these private companies before we can kind of legislate out of it. And so that is the problem right now, is that we're asking for delays so that we can reevaluate what's going on so we can get to the legislative session in January. So that's kind of the real scare right now, is that this stuff can hit. And once you get momentum with an eminent domain and they get, you know, their nose under the tent, it's going to move forward. So
who's going to represent you, is what I'm saying. I mean, like, are there any lobbyists involved, or who's going to represent, taking a pause on this, if you will?
So,
This session?
yeah, so I would say that what Meredith mentioned about the senators and state reps who are beginning to kind of look at this and try to figure out what do we need to do. They're moving slow and they're kind of on the margins. There's not a lot of momentum behind that. And so I think that I'm going to say the biggest player that I'm aware of that's on the side of the people is the American Stewards of Liberty, and it's a property rights group, and they're from my understanding, they're a pretty big, powerful group. Meredith has talked to them, a lot of folks that we know. And you know, it's funny, I need to say this. So Meredith and I, we just met a month ago. There is no great coalition opposing this. What it is when you look at the length of those lines, you're going to hit a great diversity of people. And they've hit enough people that there's engineers, and there's accountants, and there's scientists and environmentalists and lawyers and politicians and people that have resources and connections. They've hit enough of those that we're kind of beginning to coalesce a little bit and maybe have some strength, but the time is so short. Before we have an opportunity to get ourselves up to strength, it's going to be over with. And we are fighting mightily to try to stop this thing. And I think the one advantage that we have is that the PUC, so the PUC was created in an act in 1975. And the purpose of the PUC, the opening line of that act states their purpose. And that purpose was to protect the people. To protect the people from the utilities who by their very nature have a monopoly. And the Act states that, and it says that normally free enterprise would, the action of free enterprise and competition would protect the people, but in utilities in Texas, there is no competition, so the PUC was created to act as I'm gonna call it a buffer, to provide those protections to the people. So that's their charge. And as such, we are in the thick of it at the State Office of Administrative Hearings, and they're administrative law judges. And we go down there, and it's a room just about exactly like this, except everybody's wearing a black suit. And I wear my blue jeans and my navy jacket because that's all I've got. And I normally wear a hat. My daggum old wife didn't want me to wear a hat up here today. She said, you're going to Dallas. You don't wear a hat in Dallas. But Mr. Miller, she's wrong. So, but I go down there and I'm the only guy in the hat. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking everybody here is getting paid to be here except Meredith and me and a few other people. But because of that charge of the Public Utility Commission of being for the people, they cut us a little slack. And they let us speak plainly, and they let us get away with a few little things, and we're using that to our advantage. We're pretty snarky. We're not disrespectful, but we're not very respectful. Because what they're doing is not right. They haven't thought about this. They're just trying to jam it through, and maybe that other, I don't know, maybe we're like a lost leader, that they're going to do our deal, they're going to get it through, and they're going to get hammered on it, but they're at least going to get it on the ground, and maybe they forfeit some of the other, I don't know. Maybe the rest of it's needed, but they don't need a line through Central Texas, and we're going to do what we can to slow it down. Maybe some of these legislators that Meredith talked about, or maybe the American Stewards of Liberty, or maybe little old Meredith and me can do something, and we can slow this thing down enough to get it into the next session. But when something passes 31 to nothing and 135 to nothing, that's a hard ship to turn, even in the next session.
So what can the everyday layman person do? It just can't be the two of y'all. You need help.
I'll take that. So write letters to your legislators and to your senators. I contact mine weekly about this issue. And right now it's the Business and Commerce committee right now that's going to be looking at this in interim charges. And so, so there's two things. There's the interim charges in the Senate and then the interim charges in the House. And the House is looking at data centers right now. And so sending letters to the House, interim charges, letters to the Business and Commerce senators. Those are the things right now that we are asking for just the everyday person. And then just to kind of get educated on this. You know, we've been trying to get our story out. This has hit us so fast. I mean, it is going fast, and that's been a challenge, is getting our story out to everyday Texans. And we've had a couple of successes lately. The Texas Scorecard has been publishing a lot of our things, and so read up on that and just try to educate yourself on these issues.
How many counties are incorporated in this?
You know, I ought to know that. I know I do not know, but I'm going to act like I know. That's always served me well. So in that middle route, that Import Path 2, I think that I'm going to say there was 14 or 15 counties on the list that was abandoned, typically 2 to 3 counties deep, you know, because if it's 200 miles long, there's a lot of opportunity to move north and south as you cover that distance. So there's probably 12 or 15 counties, let's say, in each one as a potential location. And in the end, it probably ends up in 8 counties. Each line is probably going to sit in 8 counties. So that center line, that point in the middle is around El Dorado, and each of the segments to the east and west of it are 200 miles. So a 400-mile route. And once, you know, way out west, those counties are huge. But as you get into central Texas, the counties start getting smaller. They get, you know, the places get smaller. You know, like my place would be a trap out in West Texas. It'd be a crowding pen. But so you just hit more people, more houses, more infrastructure. So a lot of impact. I think I've heard maybe thousands of individuals will be directly impacted on each route, thousands of property owners.
Yeah.
Well, you do have, in each county, you have a county seat, correct?
Yes.
So that's where I would go, is talk to those involved in the county seats.
Yeah, we thought the same thing. So we go to the county, and the county says, well, we're a political subdivision of the state, and we don't really have any power. So they wrote some strongly worded letters, and that was about the extent of it. Now, Meredith and a lot of folks are getting their counties, who really are hamstrung, to form 391 commissions. So in our code, in Section 391 of somewhere in the Texas Government Code, they allow public entities to form something that's like a council of governments, basically. I mean, the council of governments came under this, or MPOs. And so like in Burnett County and the city of Burnett formed a 391, and that gives them some authority. But it's a tough fight, and here's the real issue is these are so big and it's so fast that they've chewed up all the resources. So there's a handful of transmission attorneys in the state, because that's all that was ever needed. And they served that industry. And now this work is, I'm going to make it up, it's tenfold what it was 2 years ago. Well, all those people are taken up. So you can't get anybody with transmission line experience. And then every other lawyer is taken up. So you're left, you know, in getting that help, you call some attorney, they don't know what they're doing. And half of them say, you know, all I do is wills and trust. I can't do that. And maybe, in my case, I got somebody to do it, some outfit up in Dallas. They're slower than me, and they're not as passionate as I am. So I burned through a chunk of change and then said, you know, I'm done. And I'm doing it myself now.
Any other questions? Okay.
One more.
What about health
Yeah, that's a big deal. I can see we're getting one of these from the Oscars, but so that's a deal with the in the regulation. They must consider that, and what they must prudently avoid exposing people to the electromagnetic fields, and basically what that boils down to is if they're within 500 feet of a habitable structure generally going to be a house, but it could be a school, anything where humans like to, they want to be at least 500 feet away, and that they need to be willing to spend a little bit of extra money to provide that buffer. So that's the extent of how it's considered.
And can I chime in too? I'm going to add that 500-foot buffer is for a 345K because the state has not gotten to a chance to update standards. And so that is a problem.
Hey, thank you all for having us.
Thank you.